All right, good afternoon, everyone. Just a few things at the top, and then I'll be happy to take your questions. So as you know, the Secretary has been on travel to the Indo-Pacific for the last week, and today he wraps up his trip in Jakarta, Indonesia. Throughout the Secretary's visits to India, Republic of Korea, and Indonesia, the common thread across all of his engagements have been a shared commitment to a free and open Indo-Pacific. He heard directly from allies and partners who expressed their support for this goal, and the department will continue to work closely with ASEAN to promote a regional order based on the rule of law, respect for sovereignty, and territorial integrity. Also during his trip, the Secretary had the opportunity to speak with his counterparts from the Philippines, Thailand, Vietnam, and Indonesia to discuss a number of bilateral initiatives. Now, as you saw last night, President Biden and President Xi committed to the resumption of high-level military-to-military communication. Additionally, the U.S. and the PRC agreed to resuming telephone conversations between their theater commanders. Secretary Austin welcomes this announcement and will meet with his counterpart when that person is named. As these agreements were just reached yesterday, we know that we have work to do with the PRC military to solidify these principles for actions. We will keep you informed as these procedures are codified and when we schedule our first meetings and calls. And as Secretary Austin has said, maintaining open lines of communications between our two militaries is essential to avoid misunderstandings and miscalculations that could lead to a crisis or a conflict. Switching gears, earlier this morning, Congress avoided a government shutdown by passing the bipartisan continuing resolution, which I believe is headed to the president's desk for him to sign. This short-term CR will ensure that our troops and civilian workforce will be paid through the holidays. However, the department continues to urge Congress to pass a full-year appropriations, which is the best thing that Congress can do for our national defense. As we have long made clear, operating under a short-term continuing resolution hamstrings the department's peoples and our programs and undermines both our national security and competitiveness. We also urge Congress to pass our supplemental funding request that would allow us to keep supporting Ukraine and Israel, providing life-saving humanitarian assistance across the globe, and makes critical investments in the Indo-Pacific. The supplemental doesn't just meet today's urgent challenges, but also invest in our industrial base here at home, because as we send munitions from our stockpiles, the money to replenish our supplies invest in the American industry and American workers. These investments will mean greater prosperity at home and greater security abroad, and that's why we have submitted this urgent supplemental budget request to help fund America's national security needs and to stand by our partners and to invest in our defense industrial base. And lastly, also in Congress, an additional 3 nominations were submitted to the Senate, which means there are now 455 nominations concerning 451 general and flag officers who are currently impacted by Senator Tuberville's holds. We are encouraged by the efforts in the Senate to find a way to confirm all of our qualified nominees, given that these holds, as you've heard me say many times before, have an impact to our readiness, our national security, and our military families. These holds have lasted far too long, and every day that goes by, our department and our force suffer from them. And with that, I'd be happy to take your questions. Lita.
Thanks, Sabrina. One quick question on China. Do you know when the last time the so-called red phone or whatever it was called was used between the U.S. and China? And if you don't, if you could just, can you take that?
Yeah, I think I took a question similar to that last time when I was up here. So yeah, I'm happy to take that question.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the U.S. has now shot down a drone that was headed in the direction of the Hudner, and the Houthis have also shot down a U.S. drone. Do you believe that this drone was headed for the Hudner? Because the release says that the ship took self-defense action. Mm-hmm. Do you dispute it was headed for the Hudner? Do you think it was, or do you think it wasn't? And then, if so, at what point does the U.S. take some sort of action against the Houthis for these 2 very direct attacks on the U.S.?
So I'll take your last question first. So in terms of action, as you've heard me say before, but we always reserve the right to respond at a time and place of our choosing. I don't have anything to preview from here today, and I won't get ahead of any decisions that the Secretary or that the President decides to make. In terms of the assessment that where the drone was headed, Our assessment right now is that the intended target was not the Hudner, but that the drone got so close to the crew that the commander did feel it necessary to engage and shoot down the drone. And I'm sorry, did you have one more question that I'm forgetting?
No, because it was it was self-defense, correct?
Yeah.
So it was not targeting the Hudner, you believe, or what's
our assessment?
Because there was an assessment that it was targeting.
Our assessment right now is that it was not targeting the Hudner, but it was headed in that general direction. And also, just to very quickly go back to your first question on mill-to-mill communications. I should have also clarified that while I'm happy to take the question, there of course have been communications between our ships within the region where there are, moments where, there is deconfliction used. I think you're more specifically asking on like a high level.
On that higher level drone that was set up a number of years ago and it was used on and off, but had
I just didn't want you to think like while there have not been high-level mill-to-mill communications between the secretary and his counterpart, at a lower levels in theater, there have been communications to deconflict from crises. Idris.
Two questions. First, yesterday, President Biden made a bunch of remarks about Israel, and one of the ones he made was he talked about how doctors and nurses were now being allowed to Al-Shifa, but then added that quote unquote, what was occurring before with indiscriminate bombing by the Israelis. Do you agree with President Biden that there were indiscriminate bombings by Israel, or with Israel that was saying that their bombings were precision strikes?
Well, I can't remember his exact context, but I think what he was referring to, and I'm not looking at the remarks, but was that we didn't want to see indiscriminate bombing around or into the hospital. So what the IDF did was go into the hospital with more precision. It wasn't, I think the president referenced this, there wasn't carpet bombing around the hospital or at the hospital itself. So I don't disagree with what the president said or in his remarks, but I think what you saw when it came to the Al-Shifa hospital in particular is that the IDF was going in with more precision, and we said all along from this podium and from others across the administration that we never wanted to see a firefight within the hospital. We never wanted to see innocent civilians get caught in those crossfires, and so I think that's what the president was speaking to.
And then secondly, I think in your last briefing you said that Hamas and PIJ were operating a command and control node from Al-Shifa Hospital. The Israelis have put out several videos over the past 24 hours of evidence of what they say, are Hamas weapons, a couple of machine guns, etc., but no real evidence of any command and control nodes in the traditional sense. Do you still stand by your assessment, and have you asked the Israelis to provide evidence of that?
Yeah, well, we still stand by the assessment that I think I read out on Tuesday, which what you're referring to is that we know Hamas has used hospitals like Al-Shifa to operate out of to conceal their military operations. I mean, taking a step back, a hospital should never be used for that to begin with. So however you define it, a command and control center node, a means of operating terrorist actions out of a hospital, that should never happen to begin with. We stand by the downgraded intelligence that I announced on Tuesday that we know they were using Al-Shifa Hospital. We know that they use other hospitals in the region when it comes to conducting their terrorist organizations and attacks. And so, yes, we stand by that, but we know, and you, I think, alluded to this as well, that the Israelis are there. They are doing an assessment of the hospital. They are on the ground. And so, we'll continue to receive that intelligence back as we get it.
Plan on releasing any evidence to that intelligence?
I'm not going to get ahead of anything right now. I don't have anything to preview, but if we do, you will be the first to know. Liz.
Thank you. There have been 58 attacks on U.S. forces in Iraq and Syria over the last month. There's been 7 since Sunday's U.S. airstrikes in Syria. So the rate is not slowing down of these attacks. Is the Pentagon waiting for a service member to be killed before taking stronger, more effective action?
No, absolutely not. I mean, we would never want to see that. We would never want that to be the outcome of any attack. I think, taking a step back here, as you mentioned, yes, there have been 58 attacks on our service members since October 17th, all of which have been unsuccessful. They have not caused significant damage to infrastructure, and they have not caused significant injury to any of our service members. and all of our service members who have been injured have all returned to duty. So absolutely not are we waiting for an attack to inflict more damage to alter our response. I think you saw our responses of our last 3 strikes hit. One of them hit a command and control node that was operating in a safe house. The others hit weapons storage facilities and a training facility. So our attacks have significantly downgraded and degraded, I should say, the access that these militia groups have to these weapons. And so we're not waiting on something to act. We have responded, and if there are more attacks, we will certainly respond at a time and place of our choosing. Did you have another? Sorry.
Totally separate topic on the audit. So the Pentagon just failed its 6th audit, I believe. What message are you concerned that sends a bad message to U.S. adversaries or U.S. allies? And if the Pentagon can't pass its own audit, how can the American people trust what weapons it's sending to Ukraine and Israel?
Yeah. Well, we're working on improving our process. While it wasn't the results that we wanted, we certainly are learning each time an audit passes, and it's a continuing and ongoing process that this building is assessing. One of the things that the audit did do this time around was it informed how what we had for how we could supply Ukraine, and then when the events of October 7th happened and the need to assess what we could supply Israel, we were informed very much by the results of the audit from our looking all across the entire entire building here, but also what we had provided for Ukraine. So again, it's a complicated process and it's a complicated undertaking that this building has done, but we feel confident in what we are learning each time. Natasha. Yeah.
The Pentagon keeps saying that there have been no serious injuries from these attacks, but more than 24 service members have suffered traumatic brain injury, which seems like a very serious injury. So I'm just wondering, how are you defining that, and how are you defining unsuccessful? And then my second question is if you have any updates on the 5, the search and recovery efforts for the 5 special operations soldiers who died last week.
Yeah. I'll take the last one first. So of course, I can't remember if I addressed this last time, but that's our thoughts and prayers are of course with the families who lost their loved ones over this last weekend in a training incident. In terms of any updates on those service members, I would refer you to the Army. They would have the latest for you. In terms of the injuries, again, I know TBI, of course, that's something that anytime one of our service members is injured, whether it's serious or not, we certainly take it seriously as a department. 2 of our service members did go to launch school for further evaluation. They were returned to duty soon after. So, of course, we take any injuries seriously, but these were not serious injuries. And I think that's important to remember. The United States took military action 3 different times and fully degraded some of their faces. So I think in terms of our response, we've been very effective in responding back and sending a message to Iran. Constantine.
Thanks, Sabrina. On the Hudner,
Sure.
Can you say how close the drone got to the ship?
I can't say how close it got. I don't actually know how close it got, but it got close enough to the ship that the commander felt that it needed to engage the drone.
And can you say what weapon system the ship used to engage the drone?
I can. Yeah. Tony.
Go back to the audit, the famous failed verb. Got a
I
disclaimer.
was surprised. Liz took your question. I felt like I knew you were coming around to this. So,
I don't really care.
yeah.
The disclaimer issue. What do the best minds in the building assess when you may get a clean audit opinion? How many years might that be? Since getting the 6th audit took years and years to prepare, is there a ballpark estimate you can give? How many years will it take to get a clean audit opinion in all 29 of these component audits?
Tony, I'm not going to lie, I'm not an expert on the audit, but what I can tell you is that we do have those experts in the building, and I'm not going to get ahead of them or predict on when we are going to get a clean audit. What I can say is every time we go through this process, we are learning, we are improving, and we put into place measures that certainly monitor how we spend money. But again, there are people in this building directly focused on that.
Can you take that for that question? I mean,
Well, that's a hypothetical question that I can't really get into, and well, I can't predict the future. I can't predict when we're going to get to what you're asking, and they won't be able to either. That's why each time we go through this audit process, even if it is our 6th time, we keep going through the process. We keep getting better and better at it, and when we get there, Tony, I will let you know.
it's a known unknown.
Okay. Yes. Yeah, Fadi.
Thank you, Sabrina. I have one question and then a follow-up.
Sure.
So you stated that, the Hamas were using Shifa hospitals to conduct their attacks. And you referenced the intelligence assessment. When you talk about this, can you be more specific? Based on your assessment, do you have any proof that Hamas used the building itself, which is a big building, or are you referring to the underneath the building in conducting these activities?
Well, I think if I'm not mistaken, you can correct me, but I think Al-Shifa Hospital actually is multiple buildings. So what we know is Hamas was using Al-Shifa Hospital. I can't tell you specifically if it was just one building or multiple, but they were using the hospital to operate out of. That should stand alone as a place of concern. You have many injured civilians getting treatment there. You have babies who are just born. I don't think operating a terrorist cell out of a hospital is a way to conduct any operation, but they were doing that. So it's important to point that out. But in terms of more specifics on where in the hospital, that I don't have. That's still something that I've seen. The IDF is there and doing their assessment of where the Hamas leadership was operating out of. But what I can say and what I've said before is that we know that they were operating out of that hospital.
And thank you. And then, and you said we don't want to see a firefight inside the hospital.
Yeah, I said that on Tuesday. Yeah.
And again today. So the Israelis raided the hospital. There was no firefight because they didn't find any Hamas fighters. Does the Pentagon support these types of activities by the IDF raiding hospitals?
Well, look, that's something for the IDF to really speak to. We have been very clear with our Israeli counterparts, with Minister Gallant. The Secretary has engaged with him almost regularly, almost daily, that innocent civilians, people in hospitals that are seeking care, their lives need to be protected, and they need to be that the IDF, as they conduct their operations, need to uphold humanitarian laws and the law of war. But that's how complex and complicated this entire operation is for the IDF. The fact that you have a terrorist organization embedded or at least using and operating out of a hospital, that makes any operation for any military in the world incredibly complex. And so that's something that the IDF would have to speak to in terms of their operations, but we never want to see any type of terrorist organization operating out of a hospital, using it as a command and control center, because that does put innocent lives at risk. And that's what they were doing. They're putting these people, using them as human shields, for what? And so I think it's just important. You raise an excellent question, but I think it's also important to remember why these people were put in that position to begin with. Wafa. Yeah.
Thank you, Sabrina. So can you please update us on the department level of engagement in daily military operations in Gaza? And also when you say you're engaged, like there's daily interaction, or you reach out to the Israelis on a daily basis, do they actually listen to you when you express concerns or ask questions about the military operations?
Sure. So as you mentioned, and I've said, we do have daily conversation or near daily conversations with the Israeli government. That's from the secretary. But of course, there are levels all across this government that are also having those conversations. I'm not going to go into more details of those conversations other than, we do put out a readout each time. You can certainly see a common thread of what we're emphasizing in those readouts, that yes, Israel has the absolute right to defend itself against the horrific terrorist attack that happened on October 7th. But of course, we are urging as always, in every single call, that humanitarian laws, innocent civilians must be taken into account for any operation. We do feel like they've been receptive to us. They continue to engage in our calls, and that's a good sign. We want to keep those lines of communication open. And I'm sorry, you had a first question that
the level of engagement, the department level of engagement in the daily operation.
Sure. So from the secretary, and then of course there are levels below him that engage with their Israeli counterparts. It's not just from the secretary's level. Of course, we have our policy team here. The joint staff engages, on their side. So it's multiple levels, not just happening at the secretary level.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
So when you say you have daily discussions, and can you please give us a sense about how the what's next? What are the goals of the Israelis? What's the way ahead in Gaza?
Sure.
On day 41 or 42, I believe, and the Israelis couldn't achieve much but killing civilians so far. So do they share their goals with you on a daily basis?
So again, I'm not going to get into the private conversations. We have readouts that we put out after every call, and then we have engagements below the secretary's level that continue at all different levels and pretty regularly. I'm just not going to get into any further details of those calls. We're not the IDF. We're not on the ground. We're not in their operations, but we certainly ask the questions that we feel that we need to ask. We push where we feel that we need to push, and that's what good partners do. And so I'll just leave it at that. Chris? Oh, did you have one more? Okay, one more and then I'll go to Chris. Yeah.
So I want to ask you about if you still have the same level of concern about a wider conflict in the region, even though Hezbollah didn't show intentions to really engage in a comprehensive war with Israel so far.
Yeah, we absolutely have concerns of this widening out to a wider regional conflict, which is why we have positioned the assets in the region that we have, with our 2 carrier strike groups, with more aircraft in the region, with the 26 MU also there that remains untasked, but ready in case needed. Absolutely, that's why we're concerned, and that's why you saw the secretary, at the direction of the president, surge these assets to the region to make a statement, and to make a statement to Iran that getting involved or seeking a wider regional conflict is not the right course of action. Now I'll go to Chris. Yeah.
Thank you, Sabrina.
Yeah.
I just wanted to pick apart the degrade versus deterrence element of these
Okay.
airstrikes. You said they were significantly degraded, these malicious capabilities.
Mm-hmm.
If the department deems these, and the president deems these strikes are necessary in the future, how feasible is it for the United States to destroy, blow up enough of their capabilities that even if they want to, they can't attack U.S. forces?
Well, that's just getting into details that I'm not going to speak to, because that gets to also an intelligence assessment. So what I can say is that when you were asking about degraded versus deterrence, I mean, we degraded these facilities enough that they can't use them anymore. So they're completely destroyed. So the ammunition or the weapons storage facility that is in Syria that we just hit this past Sunday, those weapons are no longer usable. That means that whatever groups were using those and wanting to inflict harm or more attacks on our troops can't use them anymore. So that's completely degraded their ability of at least another site to inflict damage on our troops. Joseph, yeah.
Thanks. One on the drone, the MQ-9. Can the Pentagon publicly attribute that to the Houthis, that they launched that drone?
I think we know it came from Yemen. Again, we're still doing an assessment of the attribution, but I would have no reason to doubt that it would have come from the Houthis, but it's, not like they sent a note with it.
Sure. Yeah. All right. And the second one, on Israel, senior...
Maybe that was more flippant than I needed to be, but you know what I mean. Like, we're still doing an assessment of the ownership of, who launched the drone, but we do know it came from Yemen.
And earlier today, a senior defense official said that this department is involved in tracking civilian casualties in Gaza, obviously as a result of both sides, but also the Israeli strikes in Gaza. Can you, is CivCaz involved? Can you elaborate at all? And is there a report that's going to be coming out? I mean, we're over a month into the conflict now.
I'm not sure what you're referencing by keeping track of civilian casualties in Gaza. I haven't.
Based on U.S. military support to.
I haven't seen that. I mean, again, we do our own assessments, but I have nothing to read out of as we get information. Again, we're not on the ground here. We know that the health ministry does put out civilian casualty numbers, but that is run by Hamas. So we have to, of course, take that with a bit of a grain of salt here. But I don't have an independent assessment on our side that we're doing right now.
Are you guys asking the Israelis to try? I mean, obviously, they can't keep track of every single one when they're this high, the number. But are you guys asking them to keep track?
That's not. I mean, that's something that is going to be very difficult to keep track of, and that's not something that I think we're directing them to do, but something that I think most armies, in their operations would keep track of just, general casualties. But we're not asking for a count every day. Again, we do our own assessments, but I just don't have anything more for you on that. Yeah.
North Korea announced that they successfully test a solid fuel engine for intermediate range ballistic missile. So do you think that this engine is related to the Russian technology North Korea may receive from Russia?
That I couldn't speculate on. I'm not sure. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you, Sabrina. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, he shared a detailed animation and the IDF as well of the Shifa hospital and a detailed drawing of the Hamas possible, garrisons underneath the hospital building.
Okay.
So so far we saw only a couple of videos established by or broadcasted by the IDF social media, shows us a couple of assault rifles only. Since you have very close contact with your Israeli counterparts, do you have any information about solid proof of these animations that the Israeli Prime Minister shared before?
I can't speak to the animations or video that you're speaking about. I just haven't seen it, so it's hard for me to respond to exactly what you're referencing. We were very clear on when I came out on Tuesday, and can reiterate that we know that the hospital was used as a operation center for Hamas. They were using it. They had their, I don't know if leadership, but they had militants in there operating out of the hospital. But I don't have more for you in terms of what you're referencing in terms of the video. Sorry. Yeah.
I have a couple on Ukraine. So could you please provide a preview of the next Ukraine Defense Contact Group meeting? I believe it's going to be the last meeting this year. So what's the focus going to be on? And do you expect to hear any announcement about new aid packages, etc.?
So I don't have an announcement yet for the next Ukraine Defense Contact Group, but you know that they meet monthly. And so I think we should expect an announcement within the next few days of when the next one will be. In terms of aid packages, you've seen us roll out pretty consistently aid packages for Ukraine. We have had to parse down our support and our security assistance for Ukraine because we don't have additional funding because the supplemental hasn't been passed. So we just rolled out our last presidential drawdown authority, and I believe that was last week. Look, when we're ready to roll out the next one, we certainly will. We know that Ukraine continues to face and continues to endeavor in its counteroffensive, and they need continued support on a regular basis. So we know that we have to do that. We know that we have to continue to meet their needs. And that's something that certainly will be discussed at the next Ukraine Defense Contact Group. But in terms of a package preview, I just don't have more for you to announce today.
And for how long can you support Ukraine before the Congress looks into new funding? Because the last packages were thinner and thinner, we saw.
Well, that's because we don't have a supplemental. I mean, frankly, that is why we requested an emergency supplemental package to provide funding for, security assistance to Ukraine and also to backfill our own stocks. The supplemental, again, is in Congress. We continue to urge Congress to pass a supplemental. A supplemental is put forward and packaged together because it's an emergency request. It's not part of the budget process. And so we have a large amount that we want Congress to authorize for Ukraine and for Israel and for our investments in the Indo-Pacific and, of course, for our own investments in our defense industrial base. So that's something that we're going to continue to urge Congress to pass. But you're absolutely right. You have seen smaller packages because we need to parse these out. Because we don't know when Congress is going to pass our supplemental package. And so we're continuing to talk with allies and partners. We're not the only country here contributing to Ukraine's urgent battlefield needs. As you know, the Ukraine Contact Group is over 50 nations. So it's not that it's just the U.S. supporting Ukraine, but the president has been very clear that we are going to stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes. And so that means Congress passing our supplemental request, and we hope that they do that soon.
For how long do you think you still have them before Congress looks into that? Like it's going to be weeks, months, or?
Yeah, well, again, each package varies by dollar amount. So you've seen some smaller packages. I'm not going to forecast how long that's going to last. That certainly wouldn't do the Ukrainians any good. That would really benefit the Russians. And so I'm just not going to be able to, give you a timeline on how long we're going to be able to have these packages continue to go forward. But what I can say, and what I will continue to say, is that we need Congress to pass that supplemental request. Yes.
You keep talking about the intelligence in the past tense, that you believe, the intelligence believes Hamas has used hospitals. Do you have intelligence that they currently are?
I have only the intelligence that I read out, the downgraded intelligence that I read out yesterday, I'm sorry, on Tuesday. Past tense, present tense, I don't want to parse out words here, but we know that Hamas has been using the hospital, the Al-Shifa hospital, and other hospitals in Gaza. I'm not going to get into more specifics on, what they're doing now, whereabouts, all of that. We know that the IDF has taken control of Al-Shifa hospital, so I don't have more to share with you on that front.
It matters because under international law, you have to have proof that a combatant is currently, right then in that moment, in the hospital in order to strike.
Yeah. Again, when I read out the downgraded material, we felt very confident that Hamas was using that hospital to conduct its operations. And as you saw in open source, there have been evidence of that the IDF is showing now.
Well, and that's what I want to ask you. How would you characterize the video that the IDF released? They said it's irrefutable proof that Hamas was there. Does the U.S. agree?
I don't think we're disputing that Hamas was using Al-Shifa hospital. I mean, I read that out on Tuesday. I said very specifically, Al-Shifa is one of many hospitals in Gaza that Hamas uses to operate out of and to conduct their operations out of. So I'll let the IDF speak to their broader assessment. I mean, they're still ongoing right now, but I just don't have more for you or more intelligence to share, and I'm frankly not going to do it from this podium.
One more. So
Sure.
You're saying that the video of a blurred laptop, a flak jacket, a handful of rifles, that backs up what you've been saying, that Hamas is operating in the hospital?
I'm happy to repeat what I said on Tuesday, but the downgraded intelligence that I read out on Tuesday and that I will reiterate again today is that Hamas uses, Al-Shifa being one of them, but hospitals in Gaza to conduct and to operate out of and to further execute on terrorist actions within Gaza.
Does that video back that up?
Again, I'm just going to leave it at that. Thanks. Did you have a question back here? Oh, sorry. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Sabrina. Regarding to the, as you mentioned that there were 58 attacks against U.S. service members since 17th of October. So do you have any plans to change your booster in Iraq and Syria, especially most of these attacks happens in these two countries? And how do you see the Iraqi government respond or react to protect these spaces? Do you believe they have the ability to protect these spaces? Thank you.
So I think your question was on force posture changes within Syria and Iraq. So I don't have any force posture changes to announce, but as you know, I can't remember the date, but we did announce that we were moving Patriot and THAAD batteries into the region to help protect our troops with more air defense. So that's something that we have done to bolster our protection measures of our service members in both Iraq and Syria and elsewhere. And all the Patriot batteries are there and fully running, and the THAAD battery, I believe, is still making its way over. But I don't have any more force posture movements to announce.
What about the Iraqi government? Do you think they have the ability to protect the bases that where the U.S. troops are being, like in Anbar or in the north of Iraq?
Yes, we continue to work with the Iraqi government and their military in terms of protecting our troops. We are in Iraq at the invitation of the Iraqi government, so we certainly work with them and partner with them. And they're, the secretary has had calls with his counterpart on making sure that our service members are protected in those areas, and we continue to engage them in those conversations. Okay, thank you. Sure. And then we gotta wrap. Sorry.
Yeah, Tuesday you said 55 attacks since October 17. We're hearing different numbers. Is that what's the latest?
Sorry, I can give you that rundown. So as of today, there have been approximately 58 attacks. So that's 27 in Iraq and 31 attacks in Syria.
30 since Tuesday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
One more quick. I'll be quick.
Okay, Fadi.
Yeah,
one
you.
more.
No,
but then I feel like I have to do Tony. So I'll do these two, and then I gotta wrap it up.
I give it to you. You're very generous with your time. Based on the intelligence that was recently downgraded that you talked about on Tuesday, and based on any other information that is available to you, how recent did Hamas leadership use a Shifa hospital?
Well, that would get into further intelligence assessments that I just can't get into from here. Again, as I mentioned earlier, and I told you, we feel very confident that Hamas was using Al-Shifa and other hospitals to conduct operations out of. But just in terms of when, where, all of that, more specifics, I just can't get into those details. Did you have a question?
PDA
Sure.
issue. Just to clarify for the record and for those watching, doesn't the Pentagon have about $4.9 billion of authority left for PDAs? They just don't have. They got like $1 billion left to replace their equipment, but you can give like $4.9 billion in PDAs going forward.
Yeah, I'm not trying to minimize it. I'm just trying to tell you that yes, we do have $4.9 billion from the recalculated PDA funds that we continue to draw down of. That's what we're using. But we only have 1.1, I believe, left to restock our own inventories. And so, again, we know Ukraine is going to need more than that. Right. And so that's why we did submit that supplemental request. And a lot of that supplemental will be used also to replenish our own stocks.
I just want to make the point that it's not getting cut off yet. You got $4 billion, and only $5 billion left to play out, however long that goes.
Yep, that's correct. Yeah, thank you. All right, thanks everyone.